Hi, everybody. We have a couple of questions tonight. One from Betty Toslin in England, and perhaps might be interesting. I'm not sure how to answer this one, but if you have the time, could you speak a little bit about magnetism? What happens to us and others for this to take place? I hope you are well. You're blah, 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 blah. Okay. Magnetism is an interesting subject in that it's considered to be primarily a field of force around an electrical circuit. And it's used in all kinds of things, including motors, including anything that anybody who ever has any electricity pouring through them basically becomes magnetic in nature. But I'd like to extend this concept into the idea that relates to a personality, because a personality is basically a field of consciousness. We, of course, have a brain and a nervous system, and therefore we have an electric field pulsing through us. It's the way we are. We have a field of consciousness that has all kinds of impact physically on our cellular structure. And it's something that you can read in biology. And all you have to do is expand your thinking a little bit into the concept of an electrical field and what an electrical field is. And some really basic high school physics can just remind you of it. Your plug in the wall reminds you of it. But let's expand that a little bit in terms of how you engage with life. If you can allow yourself to understand that each and every act of relationship that you have with your own self, and obviously that self with others, and the environment that you happen to have in terms of your way of living, then what you're really dealing with there in a kind of a way is expressing a magnetic form, physical, the emotional intensity that you have under every and any circumstances whatsoever, another magnetic construct, the way you put it all together and refine it unconsciously. Primarily, most people are unconscious beings, no offense to anybody. But the bulk of your interaction with life is really focused on reflexive responses to how things are going on around you. And also, if you take a really close look, you begin to notice consciously that you are a reactive being, a responsive being. And that, in a sense, is an intense engagement with energy, a use of energy, and that has a field that is involved with it. Your way of thinking that is reflexive is often accompanied by an emotional engagement where you have a protective sequence that goes on in you for the purpose of protecting how you express yourselves consciously or unconsciously, but primarily with most human beings, the reflexes are so fast, there's no such thing involved as a conscious interaction. If you could slow everything down quite a bit, you would notice that you were doing things quite unconsciously because the speed of expression or response was so fast. You had no time to think about it, and you didn't want to think about it because you were automatically doing the so-called right thing for the images that you had created as an individual personality. and the ones that you use in life to engage with others and yourself, for that matter. There are layers of magnetic fields that relate directly to how you function. I don't care how it is, it just doesn't matter. And those fields of force connect directly to each other. And I'm talking about the interdependence of layers of emotion, ways of responding, thinking, acting, engaging, and for the purposes as well. Purposes have a relationship with this as well. The purposes that you might use your interaction or believe your interaction should be used based on how you believe you think without even knowing how you think. This is not uncommon. It's just something that happens in our world. We often also engage with reading material, for example, as we have in high school, universities, and colleges all over the world. And those things that we do remember and believe have to be true, and many of them are refined and fine, become our mainstay of what we believe is of great value. We, in a kind of a way, create a field of defense around these ways of interacting because we have read them, we have memorized them, and they have been pronounced, from our perspective, or anyone else's for that matter, as true could be, perhaps. This happens in the material world. Fortunately, it happens in the scientific world, and the scientific world as well has been inundated with material that hasn't been true, but has been reconnected with, and there has been an attempt to make it more true, information more true than it was before. I wish it was honestly the same with our emotional dispositions. In other words, that we could allow ourselves to reconsider how we think about others or ourselves or acts of engagement that we have within us that have created images that we have to protect. But we have a difficult time with this one because baseline positions are often considered places where we feel more balanced and more reassured and comforted by our relationship with how we anticipate that we are. Not that we know we are, we anticipate we are like that. And we maintain that anticipatory orientations because if we do not, somehow we feel very uncomfortable. It's a dilemma because there is a field of intensity or field of recognition and self-protection in this, and this is literally magnetic in nature, in one could say, where if you change something, then other things within you might be okay with changing. Or if you change something within you, that might mean that other things that you think along the same lines may not be as true as you originally thought. This sounds very complicated. It's not really very complicated, but it sounds very complicated. Now, add the ingredient that an individual attains energy from and through the nervous system, endocrine gland system, affects the physical form, the mental form as well, the body. But at the same time, there is a chakra system, Zephyrotic system, a valve system that penetrates into these matter planes, allows energy to move through them for the purpose of coordinating or setting up a system that can coordinate in these more material planes a form that we call personality, of course, physical form, emotional and mental form. Okay, this is, you can say, yeah, but Ron, what if I don't believe in it? Well, if they're there and you don't believe in it, they're still there. A hard one for people to handle because of the particular kind of thinking process that we have in the current times. And as a matter of fact, I think in a kind of a way, very important kind of thinking system. If we don't see it, it's not there. Well, we know that's not quite true because of chemistry, because of physics, because of mathematics, even if you look at it metaphorically. What we do know is intensity comes from somewhere. So we say it comes from us. But if energy is stimulated on the outside by I'll call personality the outside for a moment, by the personality's response and reaction to something, because it fears that it's under duress somehow, stress, then under that particular circumstance right there, we then have the capacity to pull more energy into this emotional intensity from a plane that might be called other than the matter planes, even though it might be matter at a different level. We don't know that. However, the concept of becoming more conscious of the reality of the chakras or the Sephiroth or whatever else you want to call them, fireballs, or the willingness to go beyond the methods used currently, or the identifying validations that we use that are on the surface that we can see with the five senses and perceive with the five senses. To go beyond this, to engage with something other than what is normal on these planes, I suspect also creates a broader magnetic intensity. Our dilemma here is that when that magnetic intensity increases in us, we don't know what to do with it. So we use methods that we already use, methods of protection, defense, self-validation, judgments that are related to attempting to fit ideas into the way we already believe things have to be, then we are still left with an intensity inside that we can't explain, or an understanding inside that it's as if we have something to notice, but we can't just put our finger on it. Well, thus perception might be, if it could be added, might increase the concept of the magnetic structure even being considered a personalized form of some kind that we layer out and use for the purpose of engaging and surviving in our world. We have trouble with all of this stuff. Obviously, it sounds like as if it's complicated, but we have a dilemma. Our dilemma is if there is any increase beyond what we call normal in us, we basically look for things around us to blame, including ourselves. Sometimes there's nothing to blame. Sometimes there's just something occurring inside of us or around us that we do not understand. But we're reluctant to say that we don't understand something. Understanding something seems to elevate our position and place in life, according to the images that we hold dear and near. Understanding them first is even more important. Somehow, understanding something first doesn't necessarily mean that you understand anything. It's just the first idea. But then you protect the first idea, and it's the only idea that makes some sense. And because it's yours, you're the one who makes sense of it. You know, this kind of stuff. This happens everywhere with everybody. So it's not something that's negative. It's just it's kind of process. But now you begin to notice that other people's intensities affect you. Boy, this is like a freedom pen to say that everybody affects you and you're the one that doesn't affect yourself and all of this kind of stuff. We have to get through this. This is like child's play. It's like childish people. Yeah, if the shoe fits, right? We're all that way. At some times, not all the time, from time to time. Magnetism is interesting. I remember one time something bothered me a whole lot. I was walking on one side of Elgin Street, and I could perceive a lot of intensity around me. It was energy, and I was trying to figure stuff out, trying to figure out what was causing this and where was it coming from. That was many years ago. And I noticed some people on the other side of the street suddenly began to cross over to my side of the street. This is very disconcerting for me. A little bit of an introvert. And I realized that it was as if there was a pull on my part towards these folks, and they were following the pull. I don't have any trouble with the idea of people acting unconsciously. Have you ever acted unconsciously and noticed, why did I do that? Well, there's a lot of that goes on. It's almost acting automatically. And we depend on these reflexes because some of them are habitual. We've used them for over the years consistently. Repeat, mimic. These are all psychological, very developmental processes that all human beings are a part of. But then you sometimes can perceive as if there's a bit of a pull inside of you. You can, if you're conscious of it. If you're unconscious of it, you can't feel that magnetic pull in your direction. I realized that I was perceiving a magnetic pull. It seemed that these folks were being pulled in my direction, and it bothered me. I did not want that type of personality I have as well. And so I tried whatever I could internally to try and calm that down inside of me. And suddenly, a couple of people walked back over to the other side of the street, and one came along. And as they went by, they looked at me kind of quizzically, and I just continued on, and they continued on. I had never considered that aspect to be so strong in any individual, although I've met many people who are very brilliant, capable, intense people who are pretty profound. Tommy Douglas used to be one of these people who I met many years ago. A powerful, powerful, able being, but a very, you could say, magnetic personality, but a happy guy, very brilliant, able guy. But there are others who are powerful in different ways and not so pleasant. All of these things in our world, I think, are related to layers of consciousness. And there's a kind of beaming that goes on. You know, for example, you get dressed up, you organize, you going to this place, you have to put on a tie, there's traditions that you do, and put some stuff on, fix your hair up. I don't care. It's all so that you can pull the attraction of another to you to see that you are somehow valuable. These things are consistent. Well, try it the other way. Watch someone on the street who is not very well dressed and a little dirty and kind of a bit smelly, and your tendency will be to move away from them, perhaps. So you could say they're anti-magnetic, but I don't think they are. They're magnetic, all right. They push you away. In all of this stuff that's related to this magnetic orientation, I think we're in the process of learning that there is more to this than we want to admit. Not so positive things, and some extremely positive things, and a whole lot in the middle and to the sides. We're learning how to soften down our relationship and reconstruct our images as we engage with life and as we attempt, perhaps, to move towards a more creative or spiritual orientation, one could say. We have to learn how to deal with energy coming into us from others and energy coming into us from within us. It's kind of easy to say, well, you can assess a person if you like them, you can say, well, they have loving energy. You know, it's the personality assessment speaking. In another way, you can engage with them and they will tell you how loving they are. And you're supposed to agree with that. And you may. It's easy to do so. And then there's another method. A person who may be engaging in a different way, deep down, an energy moving through them that has nothing to do, literally, with exonerating their images. People used to call that egos. You got to be a little careful of that. Ego is a form that everyone uses for the purpose of handling life. In other words, you engage with life. And it's got a bad rap. And usually it's because it's defined as anything that you don't like in another person. And some things are obvious and it's really harsh. And you won't like that. So you can say that's their ego. But some things are really soft and lovely and very engaging, but it can also be an ego. They're ego states, and everyone has them. But here's the idea. You begin to be conscious inside. You could say that's mind. Yeah. You could say it's mental. Yep, you could. You could say it's conscious awareness of a flow inside of you that is there all the time. But you just happen to become aware of it. You're learning how to perceive a kind of magnetic structure on a different level by the conscious awareness that is being created in you for that purpose, so that you can begin to learn about the world that's broader than the images that you've already constructed. You, your name, your personality, whatever that is, doesn't matter. Even the one you don't know anything about, or the ones you don't know anything about. In learning how to understand how you function without negating, without judging it or assessing it, just recognizing it, and then proceeding forward in life the best you can, whatever that means, you'll begin to notice that your relationship with you is changing a bit. You're allowing you to be a certain way to be sure that that is the way you think you need to be. And then you may not agree with it. You're changing, you're shifting the magnetic fields around you. Another way to call those fields, talk about those fields, is energy fields around you. You know, a lot of people would be quite a bit happier if we used that term, energy fields around you. Somehow they don't like magnetic fields because it's a lower kind of thinking. If you call it lower thinking, it's lower thinking. If you call it high thinking, it's high thinking. If you call it middle thinking, it's middle thinking. It's based on your belief system. It doesn't change the fact that that's an energy field. The most wonderful thing about it all is that there are many levels of energy fields, and we have a dilemma there. We will name them. We will name them frequencies. Red, green, blue, whatever. We name them because that allows us to think we know something. And also, we have definitions of what that frequency may mean. But the subtlety of a frequency can mean many things. There are subtle frequencies and more intense frequencies of this, more intense qualities of the same frequency. They can be cruder, subtle, gentler, whatever words you want to use. But they can all be effectively helpful to another or not helpful to another. I was talking to a person one day, and they said that they gave this individual some information about themselves. And this information was supposed to help them. And it didn't. It made them angry. And I said, well, some people aren't quite ready to listen to something that seems coarse in their view about themselves. And whereas we all have various levels of coarseness and subtle and gentleness and love, all the rest of it. We have so many things within us that it's like a huge piano with a multiplicity of keys way beyond our normal pianos and below. But we don't look at ourselves like that. And we would like to think we always play in the higher keys, but in fact we don't. We play in a whole bunch of keys. We're human beings, and we live in a world that uses tremendous amounts of keys in this grand universal piano of our imaginations. And the element of evaluation, devaluation, elevation is very subjective. Unless you can get 150 people to agree with you, then it's no longer subjective. Of course, it's objective for 150 people. Well, agreement doesn't make anything objective. It makes it 150 people agree. It's very interesting. This magnetic intensity about disagreement and agreement is strong too. Almost every belief system. I was talking about baseline reading at university and high school. Really, the intensity of acquiring these things, the value that's set upon it is held in place. And it's really there for us to use as a baseline and move beyond what we read, beyond what we understand. Try to consider a subtler energy inside of you. Where do you stand in this place of relationship in the material world, in the spiritual world, in the academic world, in the world of you, never mind where you have to place yourself? That glowing vibration of a magnetic form called you has a tremendous impact on other vibrations of magnetic form, physical, emotional, mental, personality orientations, all the belief systems that they've got, no matter what. If you could call that the authentic self, I would agree. But we get confused with authentic self. I think David Bohm called something like the authentic self, and Krishnamurti called it something of the same ilk. And others have called it very similar. Sri Aurobindo called it something similar to this. And what you're dealing with there is looking for a self that doesn't necessarily agree with what you believe or what you understand to be true. Well, how are you going to find that? By being awkwardly open to a consideration that, if thought upon by you in a manner that's very, very strange, your thought process goes empty. It's almost like you're waiting for a consideration to occur to you. That occurrence expresses itself through a flow, call it magnetic if you like, that engages with you and your magnetic form, your personality version of the great listener or understander of things. A lot of emphasis in a form that can perceive beyond what it already knows is related to an engagement with a higher state. Related to, not perfect, related to. So we're attempting perhaps on a human level to open our minds to a concept that almost is akin to two clouds of force touching each other. That sounds strange. And the first cloud of force that is stabilized, relatively speaking, allows the influence of another to be considered, not necessarily believed, to be considered, and then the consideration allowed to move into what is already considered to be true. Or not necessarily agreed with because it doesn't fit yet. So here's the idea. A cloud of force that is so far beyond our understanding, spiritual force, that every time we look at it, we come up with the same old idea we had before and believe it's true. How's that one? That's a day-to-day occurrence. You meet other people, you engage with them, you talk about things, you agree with some things, you don't agree with others. Well, that's normal. So here's another not normal. You meet somebody, you engage with conversation, and because they don't agree with you, they're not worth listening to. Oh, by the way, I said that wasn't normal. I suspect that's very normal as well. If you can expand the range of willingness to take in and try to understand the perspective of another without shooting it down first, it will influence how you engage with these magnetic fields. Example, if you perceive a flow inside of you different than the one you're normally used to. For example, you may not be normally used to anything, or you might get angry, or you might care for somebody, or you might have a thought in your mind that is ingenious, or you just might hit your knee and your body says, oh gosh, it's hard to walk today. I hit my knee. And slowly gets better, gets back to what is normal. Slowly, your agitation, negation, or overly positive orientation gets back into a place where you can say, I was upset there. I really thought that was wondrous. So you can see and engage with both of those intensities or fields of consciousness as if they're part of you, but not necessarily do you have to maintain them and be there all the time. If they're there all the time, they become part of your image. Then you have to protect them. It takes a lot of strength to keep protecting them. Yeah, but it would take a lot of strength, Ron, just to say that they're there and I don't want them there. Well, and then maybe I do want them there. Maybe it gets me something. Yep. That's us. That's the human race. We are tremendous engaging fields of consciousness within each other. You affect me, I affect you. You want to try that? Let me show you. If you have a partner, try to figure out where your partner affects you, how they engage emotionally, how they engage physically, how they affect you. I didn't say how you agree with them. If you have an automatic reflex not to agree with them, that's how they affect you. What are you doing that for? What's your need that you're fulfilling within you for the purpose of being the image that you believe you have to be okay with you? All right. Let's go crazy. If that wasn't enough. Let's say every time you pass somebody on the street, if you were consciously aware of energy fields, you would notice that that field of them, where they are functioning for the purpose of being them, unconsciously or consciously, went right through you and out the other side as they passed. Because you're pretty good at some of the stuff that they do, you find yourself holding some of their stuff in you so you can be better at being you, because it's similar to them. Nobody wants to hear that story. Well, that depends on how important you believe your images are, how the structure of your image, your magnetic fields, your intensity around the brain and the nervous system, and how you use it, how the organs are interactive with them, creating a tremendous flow of intensity, often related to just a plain life force, and how you use it, and how you're not aware you are using it. And sometimes the subtlety of your unconscious imagination and how you believe you should use it for your own purposes because you are a schemer. Another way to say that, a survivor of life in the way you believe you need to be, called an image of some kind. Can you then see and be okay with the fact that you are those things? Not negative, not necessarily only positive, but a whole bunch of different things, different layers of consciousness, interactive with other people's layers of consciousness relative to those same things. Lee Martin asks a question in relationship to the world in terms of how these, in a kind of a way, how are we ever going to grow up and move our way out of these layers so that when we see that we are acting in a similar way to others that we don't think are very kind or nice and not very helpful, how can we allow ourselves to pull back when we're depending on ourselves to remain there for the survival of us? A really tremendous question. Very difficult. Learning how to mature in a level of consciousness that demands we don't, because the whole species will shift and change if we begin to do so. And if you begin to do so, you had better do so in a quiet manner, because you will not be appreciated. Yeah, well, we don't appreciate everybody either. And they don't appreciate, others don't appreciate us. Appreciate you. Do what you can. Become as conscious of that flow as you possibly can. so that you can begin to learn that we are interacting fields of force tremendously at the level of a kind of growing that might be able to shift our intentions from time to time to a place that might be helpful, generally speaking, to all of the layers that we're a part of currently in our living form here on these planes. You're not going to spend the rest of your life just figuring that all out. Well, maybe you will. Maybe it'll be okay. Maybe you get a hold of it once. You have an idea. You perceive a great field of flow in a certain state for a second all around you. You realize people are in and out of these fields of consciousness and back into solidified forms, hard as rock. And out of them again, consciously aware, into becoming unconscious, and conscious again, and unconscious. Yeah, we call it reflexes. I know that. But if we can even notice our reflexes and be okay with them and understand us better, then maybe we can understand others a little bit better and realize that we're a part of the interaction that others have with us. We are a part of the reactions and actions that other people have with us. And maybe we can help ourselves a bit, little at a time. It's possible. And perceive the interactions that we are as a being, perhaps becoming Homo sapiens sapien. Perhaps, maybe not. But at least we can begin to understand ourselves as clouds of force. Ultimately, in my opinion, we will know this more and more. My biggest concern, I think, is the fact that we might ultimately be able to use these forces for purposes that are still fairly low on the material plane chain. This disturbs me because we use them verbally and we interact with others in a not so really pleasant manner from time to time. And we ache for attention related directly to our needs based on the images that we've constructed. Perhaps it's not our time yet, but perhaps it's our time to begin. I hope that last part is exactly true. We know that we know very little, but we believe we know a lot. That statement is disturbing to me, primarily because our experiential engagement is often superseded by our imagination and our need to validate ourselves through some of the past engagement with what is said is true. We will continue to see, I think, hopefully differently than what has been recorded previously. That doesn't mean we have to see something different than what's recorded previously. But subtlety is of great value if we're focused only on consistent, more matter-oriented form, then it'll be difficult for us because we will tend to use those concepts for the purposes that relate directly to how we have used form before, as tools, as implements for our own personal purpose that relates directly to being important personally. If you can't call that an ego, I don't know what you can call it, but you can call it for sure image protective purposes. We have to get beyond these things, and it is not easy to do. But recognition of the fact that it isn't easy to do is perhaps more important than what we understand. And I'm talking personally, as opposed to jumping in and believing that we've figured it all out. Once you figure something out, if you can, go beyond that baseline. You've just drawn another little line, a layer that is very difficult to go beyond. Give me some water. Excuse me. That's either a cold or the opening of a throat center. Beware. I wish you well, everybody. Have a good evening. Have a good meditation.